Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Lee Camp. This is Dangerous Ideas. Thanks for being here. Thanks to the 30,000 of you that watched the last live stream. Thanks to the 100,000 of you that watched the latest video clip on Antony Blinken. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. I got a big show for you today. Unfortunately, it is a lot of it is about the continued genocide being perpetrated by Israel. Hopefully, I also will have Lowkey on the show a little later. But thank you all for being here. Let's dive into it. They're sorry about that. They're calling it the Flower Massacre. What just took place not too many hours ago in Gaza? The IDF opening fire on 1,000 people or thousands of people in line for aid, in line for flour, literally for food, for flour. And they, this article from Al Jazeera is saying 100 people at least dead, but I've seen others reporting 150 dead. And this is just the latest massacre. I mean, if this massacre alone were the only thing that had happened in Israel and Gaza over the past 6 months, this would be still a major, major international story. But instead, this is a tiny pinprick of the massacre, of the genocide we see ongoing in Gaza by Israel. And I just wanted to, before I bring on Lowkey, I just wanted to show you Alan McLeod's post about this. He put together the various headlines from some mainstream media outlets, mainstream Western media outlets, and all of them managed to somehow cover up, at least in the headlines, cover up who did the killing, how it happened. This one from Voice of America, which is U.S. propaganda rag, says more than 100 Palestinians are killed during Gaza food distribution. Who knows how? Maybe bags of flour just landed on them. Who knows how they died? Here's from Forbes. More than 100 Palestinians killed while waiting for food in Gaza. Well, killed by who? I don't know. It's a good question. Great question. Associated Press says, breaking, Gaza's health ministry says at least 70 people were killed and 280 were wounded in a strike on a crowd of Palestinians waiting for humanitarian aid. A strike by who? Oh, I have no idea. Maybe it was Hawaii. Maybe Hawaii hit them. Maybe it was, Laos. Who knows who hit these people waiting in line for food? At least 100 killed and 700 injured in a chaotic incident where the IDF opened fire as people waited for food in Gaza, Palestinian officials say. Now, this one, at least from CNN, does say IDF opened fire, but they throw in the word chaotic as if this wasn't calculated by the IDF. They accidentally killed 100 people. You can't accidentally kill 100 people. So they're like, oh, who knows what's going on in this chaotic show. Anyway, that's one of the latest updates on what's going on. So please take a moment, everybody. Share this, thumbs up, leave a comment, all those good things. I got an epic hour for you, but I'm excited, except for the terrible news. But I'm still excited to talk to him, a friend of mine, and always doing great work. And he's been doing great work on this topic, on the topic of Palestine for so many years, and you guys probably know him. Please welcome Lowkey. Hello.
Thank you so much, Lee. That's really kind of you to say.
Yeah. I mean, you've been doing amazing work on this for so long now. Of course, I wish the news was not so stark, was not so ugly. It's tough to know really what to ask in the middle of a genocide, but I guess my opening question is, does it shock you that anyone can still pretend to justify this or pretend to endorse this? I mean, I still see people acting like this is somehow some sort of justified action by the IDF or by Israel. To me, it's still breathtaking.
I think I misunderestimated two things at the beginning of this. So number one, despite, as you alluded to, spending around 2 decades being passionate about this topic, a few of those years studying it with depth, spending time in Gaza, spending some time in the West Bank too, I underestimated the appetite for brutality on the side of Israel. I underestimated the extents that it would go to pursue its unrealistic ambitions with the Palestinians in Gaza specifically. But I also underestimated the extent to which Britain and the United States are militarily integrated with Israel, and that, you know, we're also talking about Germany, we're talking about Canada too, that ultimately their tolerance for, and it's worse than tolerance, it's deeper than tolerance, but the extent to which they are willing to carry water for Israel's genocidal ambitions with the Palestinian people has really surprised me. Actually, it's been far further than I would have thought it would be. This is worse than the Nakba, pardon me, in terms of human displacement, in terms of the killing, and ultimately Israel has built up its forces over these years. It's almost as if the Nakba and the 75 years of occupation were a precursor to this. And what's scary is that this seems like a phase from 2 or 3 phases to come from the Zionist project. So in order for Zionism to realize its aim in Palestine, you are talking about the mass displacement of the people of Gaza. You're also talking about the mass displacement of the people of the West Bank. And unfortunately, you are seeing moves towards the destruction of Al-Aqsa, the third holiest site in the Muslim religion. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That is the Ministry of Culture in Israel and the Ministry of Education funding organizations with the stated objective of replacing the Al-Aqsa compound with a temple that they understand to have existed over 2,000 years ago. And that's where we are. That's what the stakes are now. And what we're also talking about is war with Lebanon, as a recent report has shown that the US intelligence estimates are that war and an attempted Israeli invasion of Lebanon will take place before summer. Now, that's going to be a very different war, and it will require much more naked US involvement. I believe that Israel will struggle so much with Hezbollah that the US will have to become directly, openly involved, not in the sending of special forces, not in the logistics, not in the intelligence, not in the targeting help that they've given with Gaza. You know, one of the amazing things about Aaron Bushnell is this claim of one of his friends that Aaron had access to information which was making more clear the involvement of US special forces on the ground in Gaza. But the war with Lebanon will be worse than this.
Yeah, all great points, and you know, it's not just you saying this. It is even the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, said in Haaretz that Netanyahu is a messianic figure, a far-right messianic figure. He used the term, Olmert used the term ethnic cleansing. He also said that Netanyahu and his gang are looking for all-out regional war. That's what they're aiming for, which is exactly what you were just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And he also said the idea of the emptying out of the West Bank too. You know, this is really Yusuf al-Kabir, an Iraqi Jewish lawyer in Baghdad in the 30s. He referred to Zionism as a form of militant archaeology, and essentially that's what we're facing here. We are talking about the humoring of quite an insane notion, and that insane notion being that I am back projecting myself and throwing myself back into history and using that to justify me dispossessing you. So I live in London. Londinium was founded as a Roman military base. Would that give present day Italians the right to come to my home,
Right,
and take my home? And unfortunately, this is the crux of the issue, that notion is being heavily supported by the most powerful governments in the world. Israel has successfully integrated its military apparatus with other key states. And you're talking about a trilateral security state within the region, which is Britain, Israel, and the United States, that are acting in concert. And I believe far more will come out about US and British involvement in this genocidal campaign as the years go on. But in the meantime, you've got Palestinians, something like 1 in 6 children under 2 in North Gaza is suffering from acute malnutrition. You are talking about the head of the Norwegian Refugee Council saying that Israel is deliberately withholding aid and starving the Palestinian population. And while all of this is happening, you have on one of the key crossings to get into Gaza, aid being held up by those who are linked in some way to the Israeli ruling party that are protesting, bringing a bouncy castle, holding musical concerts to try and stop people getting through. I mean,
and there's literally thousands of trucks waiting to get in.
Where is the humanity in all of this? I have seen so many people who I deeply respected who have revealed themselves to be either deeply racist or very deeply careerist, to the extent that or complete cowards, to the extent that they are unable to look at this picture for what it is and are hiding away. On social media, you have some of the most prominent scholars on race, on post-colonialism in Britain, absolutely hiding. They've barely put out a message in 6 months because they cannot bring themselves to speak about the genocide that is being committed on people in Gaza. And it's a real wake-up call.
Yeah, to what they really stand for. Absolutely. You mentioned U.S. military involvement. I mean, every chance I get, I call this a U.S.-backed genocide. I mean, that's what it is, U.S., U.K. But and you also mentioned Aaron Bushnell, who has really, I mean, as tragic as it is, it apparently took something that dire to get people talking in these terms, to get the mainstream media actually to say the word genocide. Now, granted, they're saying it by quoting him, but still, you essentially have never heard that word on our mainstream networks until he did that dire act. And now you have many military people involved in other forms of protest, such as burning their uniforms. I'm going to show a little video of that, but talk about these protests of military personnel.
Well, absolutely. It's fascinating to see people expressing their disillusionment with what the US military is involved in. I also think it's worth reminding viewers that there was another person who launched a form of protest through self-immolation outside the Israeli consulate in Atlanta at the beginning of this genocidal campaign. However, and I believe it was a woman, in her case...
I heard it was a woman, yeah.
Yeah, in her case, the information about her has not been forthcoming. We don't know much about the incident, but we know that it did happen. And this is just, all of this just illustrates the malignancy of the relationship between Israel and the United States. There are people all across the US who are deeply opposed to all of this. And, the same, I think we're safe to say that the vast majority of humanity have a natural aversion to this type of violence. They believe it's absolutely not justified. They believe there's absolutely no excuse for it. They do not believe in cruelty to children on a mass scale. They do not believe in this industrial scale cruelty against people, even if they don't understand the intricacies of the issue, even if they don't even understand Israel's history as a settler colonial entity. They look at the situation and they are absolutely repulsed by it and want to try and ameliorate the suffering that they see. But there are no mechanisms that exist within our systems of governance, either here or in the United States, there are no mechanisms through which that can be achieved, unfortunately.
Yeah, and speaking to that, it may be the starkest contrast between our Congress and including the White House and the American people that I think I've ever seen, which happens a lot. The American people rarely get what they want through Congress, but we're talking Congress voting 412 to 1 to act like criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. We're talking the Senate 97 to 0 to send more aid, quote unquote, to Israel to perpetrate this genocide. Meanwhile, the American people, it's like 65% are saying ceasefire, and a very large percentage are saying this should all end immediately. And so it speaks exactly to what you're saying, that there is no mechanism for the American people, and pretty similar in Britain, to actually stop this right now.
Absolutely. And what you're seeing from the shameless political class that we have both here and in the United States is them attempting to reframe the debate about the safety of politicians. They're often indicating that politicians fear for their safety because they're being confronted about the policies. But that's what happens when you have policies quite as unpopular as this. You know, Nancy Pelosi is absolutely abhorrent in the way that she constantly seeks to deflect. You know, she said to protesters that gathered outside her house, she said, "Go back to your headquarters in China." She said, "Oh, this is Russian disinformation." You know, this is the pits of political discourse. You are talking about as unsophisticated as a person can possibly be, as blatantly lying as a person can possibly be. That's who we're ruled by. This is the kakistocracy. We are ruled by the worst of humanity. They are undisturbed by the mass murder of children, and they are backing it to the hilt. I simply do not know how these people sleep at night.
What's the sentiment in the UK? Is it 65% like in the US? Is there mass support for Palestinians?
I'm unaware of the specific numbers, and I haven't seen any polling data on it. But if you add up the amount of people that have hit the streets for Palestine over this period, I would say we can say there's millions of people in this country that feel a deep, deep sense of grievance about what Israel is doing and connect with the plight of the Palestinians. And again, this has been within our lifetime probably one of the clearest disconnects and discords between what is happening in the political sphere and what is happening in the real world and in people's lives. What they're trying to do is wrap all of Israel's violence and ethnic cleansing in the language of bureaucratic violence, in the cold, indifferent language of managerial BS, right? That's what's happening here. And ultimately, the public are not falling for it. You know, they are attempting, the British political class, in tandem with the right-wing media here, to stoke up fear about Muslims controlling Britain and trying to manipulate the political class to vote on the Palestine issue and intimidate politicians. But people here know that that's complete rubbish. You know, they've been pushing the idea of the Muslim terrorist in this country for so long. But let me tell you something. Experts of the British military estimate that you have 1 in 16 million chance of being anywhere near an act of political violence within this country. Now, pre-COVID, the amount of people that died from austerity, they died preventable deaths from austerity, according to Oxford University academic Professor Danny Dorling, it was 130,000 people. So therefore, you had statistically more chance of being killed by austerity than you did by an act of terrorism. And therefore, you have it very clearly illustrated to you who the enemy of the public is and who has more power to harm them It's most certainly your political class, and most certainly not the people that are your neighbors and that use the same services in your community and provide services in your community to you. It's important that we have a clarity about that and understand Islamophobia as an astroturfed, engineered phenomena from above, which starts with the state, wars abroad, and legislations to discriminate against Muslims. It's not the Muslims that are a threat to you, it is your political elite.
Last question, because your time is valuable, and I want you to get back to everything you have to do. But we've been talking about protests. We've been talking about the military burning the uniforms, people on the streets. Is there and all of these are valuable. Is there a type of protest you feel is having the greatest impact that people should get involved? Because I know, as I cover this day after day, one of the most common questions is what do we do?
So the context from place to place differs, and obviously within the US, I would be very limited in what I'm able to advise in terms of effective action. What I can say is in this country, Palestine Action, since it was founded and directly targeted Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms manufacturer, and its sites in this country, 77 investors have pulled out of Elbit Systems. The value of shares in Elbit Systems UK has fallen by 20%. 2 sites of Elbit Systems have closed in this country. One of those sites was sold at a loss. It was a subsidiary to Elbit Systems. And in addition to that, the British Ministry of Defence has cancelled £280 million worth of contracts with Elbit Systems, citing operational sovereignty. Now, all of this is the fruit of Palestine Action's labor. Now, what Palestine Action does is it takes direct action to shut down these arms factories, and it enters the court as the accused, but it leaves the court as the accuser, because when you have a situation, Britain is a signatory to the Arms Trade Treaty, meaning that it should not sell arms to countries that it has reason to believe may use them for violations of international humanitarian law.
Right.
So Britain violates its own obligations under the Arms Trade Treaty by continuing to arm Israel. We know that during this period, at least 26 export licenses for arms have been granted to Israel. We know that Britain is involved in logistics, in intelligence, in selling components for the F-16, for the F-35, for the Apache helicopters, for sniper rifles to Israel. So you have a space that you can be active in, and you have an example which has been successful and will continue to be successful in Palestine Action.
All great points. And yeah, BDS just in general has been incredibly impactful, especially for people that are nowhere near the conflict, and hitting Israel in its economics is a big important step. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's good to see you again, and hopefully on better news next time. But keep fighting. And and where can people follow all your work?
Thank you so much for having me, Lee. I massively appreciate it. I hope people will support Lee's show. It's massively important that independent media is able to do what it does during this period, and Lee does such a fantastic job. So you can follow me on Instagram or Twitter, Lowkey Online on Instagram, Lowkey Online with a 0 on Twitter, or X as it's known now. Thank you so much for having me, Lee.
Thanks again. See you soon. All right, there was Lowkey. I hope you enjoyed that. Such a great interview, such a knowledgeable person, and he's been, like I said, doing this for years and years. Since we're talking about the soldiers, and I wanted to highlight Kevin. Thank you for the donation. Kevin was asking if I heard about the IDF firing on Palestinians going to get aid trucks. Yes, that's how I started the show, talking about that story. I don't blame you for missing the first 2 minutes. And thank you, Tony, for the donations. And thank you, Steven, so much for the donation. Elbit Systems, Roanoke, Virginia, participates in this genocide. I didn't know they were in Roanoke, Virginia, that Elbit Systems had an office there. But yeah, there are some great nonviolent actions that can take place at these weapons contractors. And as Lowkey was saying, those are some of the most important actions we can do. Since we were talking about these protests by soldiers, by veterans, burning their uniforms, is a very impactful visual. Visuals are important in our mainstream media nowadays. But here's another military personnel, another troop who has been who spoke out at a city council in Texas, and here's what he had to say.
My name is Alan Sparrow. I was with 3rd Special Forces Group. I was with the Commanders in Extremis Force with B-23. I was a sniper, assaulter, and a breacher. I did 3 rotations, 2008, 2009, and 2007.
And I feel like that first part is important because this is not a leftist. This is not someone who's anti-U.S. military, as I am. So it has a different kind of meaning when it's coming from someone who fully endorses U.S. military actions around the world. But here's his continued statement.
I know war. What's going on in Palestine right now is not a war. It is the dehumanization. It's the genocide. It's the ethnic cleansing of a specific people to take their land. This is wrong. And there's nothing more American than speaking out against what's wrong. The U.S. taxpayer is paying for this, which makes it even more frustrating. This needs to stop. This needs to stop. Whatever you can do, anything, this needs to stop.
Powerful words from that veteran. And like I said, it has a different kind of meaning when it's coming from someone who fully endorses U.S. military actions, unlike me. Now, that doesn't mean it should be any less impactful to hear it from people that are anti-military, anti-empire. But it should have a different kind of impact on you, that even the military, even those who were in support of U.S. military actions, even they see that this is not a war. This is an extermination. This is ethnic cleansing. This is genocide. This is not some sort of war between, and the media loves to call it the Israel-Hamas war, as if Israel is just striking Hamas. Nothing could be further from the truth. We know that 70% of those killed by the IDF so far are women and children. Women are not Hamas militants. That's how their society works there. We have women in our military. They do not. So women and children, so they're innocent immediately. Then, of course, the 30 other percent that we haven't talked about, yeah, it's men, but that doesn't mean they're all Hamas militants. So this is not a war on Hamas. This is a war on the Palestinian people. And I think really most people around the world are starting to get that. Even those who endorse U.S. military actions are starting to get it. Here's something else I wanted to show you, which I'm impressed that this person on Twitter found this clip. But this is so people are talking about Aaron Bushnell's actions, and there are many people who want to delegitimize his actions or just calling him a lunatic or whatever else. And I would never endorse in terms of recommending those actions to others. I don't think people should kill themselves to make points on this. I do think veterans and military personnel should be at these protests. You should wear your uniform at them, even though I think that's illegal. Or whatever, against military policy, whatever they call it, but do it anyway. See what happens. Anyway, here is Obama talking about someone else who self-immolated, set themselves on fire to make a point. And Obama compares that person to Rosa Parks and to the founding fathers of the United States.
On December 17th, a young vendor named Mohammed Bouazizi was devastated when a police officer confiscated his cart. This was not unique. It's the same kind of humiliation that takes place every day in many parts of the world. The relentless tyranny of governments that deny their citizens dignity. Only this time, something different happened. After local officials refused to hear his complaints, this young man, who had never been particularly active in politics, went to the headquarters of the provincial government, doused himself in fuel, and lit himself on fire. There are times in the course of history when the actions of ordinary citizens spark movements for change because they speak to a longing for freedom that has been building up for years. In America, think of the defiance of those patriots in Boston who refused to pay taxes to a king, or the dignity of Rosa Parks as she sat courageously in her seat. So it was in Tunisia, as that vendor's act of desperation tapped into the frustration felt throughout the country.
So there he is talking about the Tunisian vendor. Now, some of you may recall that that protest ultimately is what was considered the spark that set off the Arab Spring. Now, many people mention the Arab Spring in a negative way because in most countries it ended up very poorly. It didn't just go great for people, but that's unfortunately how revolution often is, especially when you're up against massive military force. It doesn't mean that the sentiment of the Arab Spring in many areas, and of course in some countries it was furthered, where countries where the U.S. wanted to bring them down, such as Iran, the Arab Spring was furthered by U.S.-backed, color revolution type things. So there's a lot of nuance to the Arab Spring, but still, that that protest in Tunisia, it was considered the beginning of it. And here's Obama speaking so highly, comparing this guy to Rosa Parks, comparing him to the founding fathers of the United States. And yet now you have someone doing the same protest against genocide in the United States, a U.S. military personnel, and he's being talked about by your mainstream media as if he was a lunatic and as if just because he was an anarchist, which, he said, I believe he said he was an anarchist. That is not, if you actually understand what anarchist means, you might disagree with it, but it's like saying someone's a socialist. Okay, this person believes that we should not have a hierarchy above us, that we should be free of rulers. Okay, well, so if you disagree with that, then argue with them. But there's no reason to say like, oh, he doesn't count because he believed in anarchy. He's not a human. He didn't actually stand for the things he said he stood for. You can watch the video and watch what he stands for, and he tells you why he's committing the actions he did, committing to the actions he did. And I wanted to highlight this as well. Matthew Ho, friend of mine, veteran who quit his job at the State Department after he had served after he'd been in Afghanistan and Iraq. He quit his job at the State Department because of what we were doing, because of the behavior of the U.S. military. So if you read Matthew Ho's stuff today, it is all based, as the kids say these days. Anyway, he was putting this out there, which is a very important thing to acknowledge. He said, active and reserve members of the U.S. military who are compelled to resist their duties in response to the U.S.-supported genocide in Gaza can receive advice and support via the GI Rights Hotline at 1-877-447-4487. For those of you who can't see it and are listening to the podcast, I'll say it one more time. The GI Rights Hotline, 877-447-4487. If you are active duty and you're thinking of leaving, thinking of getting out, thinking you don't want to be involved in a U.S.-backed genocide, or even just be involved in the U.S. military while we are backing a genocide. You don't have to get orders to ship out to Israel in order for this to be something you're against. If you're feeling that way, thank you so much for the super donations, folks. You guys keep this show running. I can't even stress that enough. But if you are thinking about that, thinking of not, getting out of your service, there are people that can help. And the number I just read, the GI Rights Hotline, that's what they're there for. That's their whole job. They're waiting for your phone call to help you. They also have other services, like if you're very depressed or suicidal or something like that, they can help you find the right resources for that as well. Thank you so much. Lobster Salad gets the name of the day. Thank you for the super chat. Steven says 30,000 funny and loving, but poor dads and moms, 12,000 cute, loving, and energetic kids liquidated by a murderous regime for offshore gas deposits. Well, that is definitely one of the reasons that Israel wants to take over Gaza, but that is not the only reason. But yes, I have mentioned that before. There are massive gas deposits that have been found in the past 10 to 15 years. In the past 10 to 15 years off of Gaza. And people are talking about how part of Israel's reason for clearing out Gaza and taking it over. And let's not forget that Netanyahu went on, I was about to say went on live television. I suppose it was live television, but it went on the stage at the UN, in front of the UN, 7 to 10 days before October 7th. I think maybe 10 days before October 7th, held up a map of the Middle East and talked about how great the economy would be with a channel, basically an economic channel going through Israel to the Mediterranean. And on that map, guess what's not there? Palestine. Guess what's not there? Gaza. Guess what's not there? The West Bank. Literally held up a map with Gaza and the West Bank erased from the world and said, here's the map of the Middle East that I envision. And so that kind of fits with this whole finding oil off of Gaza. 906 says the U.S. and U.K. politicians are compromised by Israel's AIPAC and the like, so don't expect anything different unless that can be countered. Yeah, well, there is a lot of money. Thank you so much again for the donations, folks. You make this show possible, and I appreciate your thoughts. And your what you can add to this show. Thank you, the masculinist. Isn't it wild that we had no issue with Israel, a foreign country, called a member of our military an idiot for protesting? It's crazy. Yes, it is. It is insane. Okay, let's see. I want to get to these other stories. Please, everyone, hit thumbs up, hit subscribe. You make this show possible. This story actually has to do with what I was talking about with Lowkey and the fact that Lowkey, he has been heavily censored, heavily suppressed, as have I. Most of you know I had my TV show canceled by U.S. sanctions. I had my main YouTube, my bigger YouTube channel, although you guys are building up this one. Thank you. But my older one, 250,000 subscribers, erased from the planet, banned around the world. And that's what happens to you when you speak out like this, when you speak out about Palestine, about U.S. empire, about U.S. militarism, about the harm U.S. hegemony is doing around the world and capitalism in general. You speak out about those things, you will be suppressed, you will be attacked, you will be censored. And anyway, you may recall, I had a journalist on here last week named Robert Inlakesh. I had him on last week, okay? And he was great. He knew everything about Palestine. He lives in Canada, but his wife is Gazan. They have family in Gaza. And damn great journalist. I couldn't ask more from that interview, even though I did not know much about his work. And I'm not saying this is because of his interview on my show, but this happened just days after that interview. He posted, YouTube just removed my channel without giving me any warning or strikes. Essentially, all my content is about Palestine, including a number of documentaries I made in the occupied territories. This is what happens if you speak out against the Gaza genocide. And then he shows the notification from YouTube that has banned his channel. They said, we have reviewed your content and found severe and repeated violations of our community guidelines. So this is happening to a lot of people that have been speaking out about Palestine, about this Gaza genocide, is the banning, and people have to fight back against this. I'm alerting to you to this so that you can maybe repost his thing, maybe tweet at YouTube as well, and tell them to reinstate his channel. But I'm also letting you know that I'm going to keep building up my channel, and thank you so much for all you helping that happened. We're over 60,000 subscribers now on YouTube, over 70,000 on Rumble, but I could be erased any day. So if that happens, I hope you will look me up and find me at leecamp.com, at linktree.com/leecamp, and find me no matter where I end up, because I could very well be erased tomorrow on these platforms. But I hope those of you who have a minute will repost. His Twitter is at FALA Steen 47, Palestine. So at FALA STEEN 47. That's his Twitter, and you can repost that and say something to YouTube like, hey, maybe don't erase good journalists for speaking out. By the way, Lowkey is also at Mint Press, great outlet that does a lot of Palestinian coverage about Palestine, coverage about Gaza. And I was there. I had a show there for 9 months. And while I was there working on their YouTube channel is ridiculously suppressed for the same reason, because they cover Palestine. And it shows you how difficult it is to get this information out there. Okay, now I want to show a clip from CNN as their minds are blown. They had on Nina Turner, who Nina's great on Palestine and this issue. And they had on Nina Turner. What they're talking about, this is the night of the Michigan primary where Joe Biden was essentially up against no one, but he still lost something like 15% of the vote to uncommitted. These are Democrat voters. These are not Republicans. These are Democrat voters who voted uncommitted because they can't stand that he is supporting and endorsing and fully funding and arming this genocide. And so that's why they did it. So anyway, that's what CNN's talking about. And their mind is blown as Nina Turner dare say that we should be talking about all of the people being murdered in Gaza, and that's probably the reason that Biden lost. Oh, sorry. 15. So 60, almost 16% of the vote. Biden lost to no one. Biden lost 16% of the vote to a non-human. I mean, he's almost non-human. He's like an inch away from the grave, but still, at the moment, he's still somewhat human. Lost 60% of Democrats who made the effort to go to their polling place and vote for no one. I mean, that is a big percentage for no one.
When they are in fact suffering. And I am young enough to remember, colleagues, when Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and also Congresswoman Cori Bush called for a ceasefire
She said, I'm young enough to remember. Yeah, like a week ago.
Very early on, they were called abhorrent. Now, fast forward to all of these bodies laying in the wake and people who are living through this every sinjust day.
By the way, there's also been slaughter in.
So I just want to point out there, and I will let it play, so don't worry. But I just want to point out there, did you hear how 4 of them fell over themselves to interrupt her right there because she said, look at all the bodies in the wake. She is detailing. I mean, there may be vague mentions to the war in Gaza or whatever CNN does, but she made it sound like a massacre, which is what it is. And 4 out of 5 or 6 of that panel fell over themselves to interrupt. So let's hear that again.
Living through this every single day.
By the way, there's also been slaughter in Israel.
I was going to say,
so there's a lot of.
By the way, there's also been slaughter in Israel. You mean of the, so they now tell us 1,200 people were killed on October 7th. Of those 1,200, there is a lot of evidence, like loads of evidence, that at least half of them were killed by IDF. And the other half were killed in crossfire, as either in crossfire or because they were so-called civilians, but everyone in Israel serves in the military. So, I mean, sorry, everyone in Israel has been in the military at some point. Military is not soft serve ice cream. All right. You don't serve, it's serving. And no, it's just, you're in the military. Okay. But every one of them has been in the military. So these are military veterans with guns. So we will never know how many of the people killed on October 7th were running at Hamas with guns. I'm not saying that all makes it fine, but I'm saying that is a different equation than just gunning people down for fun. Anyway, so Anderson Cooper jumps in there and says, whoa, there were people slaughtered on both sides. You're telling me that is 30,000, and it's more than that because there's many people, thousands missing under the rubble, but 30,000 people, 70% women and children are killed in Gaza. You're going to jump in and say, oh, no, you can't mention them because there's people killed on both sides. That is like crazy. That is a level of crazy. That'd be like during World War II, someone brings up the Holocaust and, a lot of Jews are being executed. Whoa. There are people dying on both sides. Hey, now, both sides have lost people, okay? God, that's disgusting. That's Anderson Cooper, intern for the CIA, when he was a young lad. Vanderbilt family. I mean, can you imagine a richer, whiter, CIA-backed man having to endorse and represent a genocide? It's just, this is mainstream media. This is the media we get to choose from. Thank you. Thank you for this option. Oh, we get to choose the ex-CIA intern, Vanderbilt heir, who, went to whatever Ivy League schools, couldn't be whiter if he tried. And that's what we get on our mainstream media. Oh, he's been on the air for 70 years now. Interesting that. Thank you, Tony, so much. Tony says, for the donation for the super chat, you guys keep this show going. Can't mention that enough. Tony says, why are USA media not talking about the 100+ reporters killed by the IDF, or any national media doing a candlelight vigil for their friends murdered by the IDF? That is such a great point. And I've covered the journalists that have been killed intentionally by Israel, by the IDF. I've covered it a lot. But you're absolutely right that these people are cowards. They're sick. They're sociopathic, and they're cowards. They didn't stand up for Julian Assange, even though he's been tortured for 10 years. And they're not standing up for their colleagues who are being executed in Gaza. Like, literally, Israel has a list of journalists that they are targeting. These are not accidental in any way. Okay, let's keep going now with this CNN clip.
Opinion on both sides.
No, I'm not.
I'm not lecture on the problem, but I'm talking about the politics of this. The problem, but I'm talking about the politics of this tonight. What to you would be a victory, as somebody was calling for this uncommitted vote? What to you?
Hold on. Do you hear this? He has taken her away from discussing the dead people, the dead children in Gaza. And that's what this vote is all about. And he says, let's talk about the politics. Let's keep really to the politics. We don't want to talk about all the thousands upon thousands of dead people. We're just dead Gazans. We just want to let's just keep it to the politics. What kind of percentage would you like to see here, Nina? Nina, riddle me this. Can you talk about something else than what you were just talking about? What do you think of that? What do you think of any other thing than what you were just saying? Can you just tell us, enlighten us on that? That's basically what Anderson Cooper just said.
To you would be a victory tonight to get that message across.
I'm not denying that pain. All I'm saying that at a certain point after October the 7th, it becomes clear. I mean, you have a right-wing prime minister.
Right. We don't need to debate the issue.
But you understand.
Won't let her talk. Can't let her do it, right? Can't let her actually. She's trying to get back into the subject, and he can't let her do it.
I'm not denying anybody's pain. What I am saying is that this president and our country has the power to say to Netanyahu, we need a permanent ceasefire. The only time hostages...
If I can push back.
If I can push back, I can't let you say a sentence about this genocide. Nina Turner's not being gruesome. She's not calling these people sociopaths. She hasn't used the word genocide. She hasn't used the word ethnic cleansing. She's being what we call in the biz polite. And yet even that is too much for CNN. Even that is just too much for these goddamn clowns. They can't even hear her talk about the right-wing Netanyahu government that is not moving towards a ceasefire in any way without interrupting her and stopping her from doing it.
Wait, one more point. The only time hostages were released is when we had that brief ceasefire. That is another reason why.
And she mentions the ceasefire there and the hostages. And of course, I just like to keep repeating every time I hear the word hostages. There are because Anderson Cooper made the point, right? There are people harmed on both sides, right? He made that point at lunch. He said, oh, you can't talk about dead people in Gaza because there's people harmed on both sides. Well, you know what else? There's hostages on both sides. And Israel has about 10 to 15,000 hostages they're holding right now. Hamas has 100 and whatever, 30 or something. Israel has 15,000. Okay? So if you want to talk hostages, then talk about both sides of the hostages. Thank you, Josh, for the donation. Capitalism exudes genocide and war like pus from a wound. Oh, I love the imagery. Well done, Josh. Are you a poet? This is ruling class policy. Workers of the world unite. Read the World Socialist website. Thank you, Josh, for the donation. And you honestly, like pus from a wound was beautiful. I might have to get that tattoo now. I want you to know. I don't know. It's not going to be like on. It's not going to be on the face, but it'll be maybe neck. Capitalism oozes. What was it? Capitalism oozes militarism like pus from a wound. But anyway, great point. Okay, I am now moving on to Tim Kaine. Believe it or not, and now we're moving on to Yemen, but that's obviously connected because the U.S. is at war with Yemen. We don't call it war, right? We just bomb them. The U.S. is at war with Yemen because Yemen, or certain aspects of Yemen, certain areas, certain groups in Yemen see fit to defend the Palestinians, to defend against genocide by going at Israel's wallet, by attacking ships that are headed for Israel. So that is what's going on. And even so-called Democrat, but since all of our politicians are right-wing nutbag Tim Kaine, who was the VP candidate with Hillary Clinton, and the reason she picked him is because his connections to Wall Street are so strong that she saw dollar signs. Even he is now tearing apart the Biden administration for this war with Yemen that they're calling, a special operation or whatever dumb words they use to avoid saying we're at war with Yemen. Okay, that story and more is coming up right now. Rumble.com/Lee Camp. It is free to go there. It is free to watch there. Also on my locals page, you guys watching there, it'll keep going as well. But rumble.com/Lee Camp. Again, free to watch there. Join me over there and hit subscribe when you get there. Hit follow, hit the bell icon, all that good stuff. If you aren't going to join me over there, then you're missing out because I got that story. I got a clip of Joe Biden as well. I got some good shit coming up. I'm saving the good shit. That's what's happening right now. So join me, rumble.com/Lee Camp, and I will see you there. But if you're not going to make it over there, I just want to let you know, I live stream 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Join me every one of those days. Even if you don't get an alert, just be there. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I'll see you there. All right, let's keep going at rumble.com/Lee Camp. Sorry, let me